The prisoner had only finished half of his meal when he suddenly heard the guards talking outside his cell. The moment he heard them, he didn't waste a second. Using all his strength, he quickly moved his bed out of the way. Then, he hurriedly removed the bricks from the wall and carefully crawled into the hole, hiding inside while watching. A moment later, the jailer entered the neighboring cell with his men. When he saw the prisoner lying motionless on the bed, he became suspicious that the man was pretending to be dead. To confirm his suspicion, he ordered his men to lift the soles of the prisoner's feet. Then they burned them with fire. When he saw that the prisoner showed no reaction to the pain, he finally ordered his men to stuff the body into a sack and throw it outside, but they never imagined that another prisoner was secretly watching everything from behind the wall. As soon as the guards left, the man immediately crawled out through the hole. Even though he had seen everything with his own eyes, he could hardly believe it. Without thinking twice, he tore open the sack to find out the truth. When he saw the tired and weakened face of his old friend inside the sack, he was forced to accept the cruel reality. An overwhelming wave of grief filled his heart, and tears streamed down his face. After calming himself down, an incredible escape plan suddenly came to his mind. Without wasting any time, he began tearing apart the sack wrapped around the body. Soon, the sack was completely open. With great difficulty, he dragged the body into his own cell and carefully placed it on his bed. Right after that, he cut off his thick black hair and gently placed it over his old friend's white hair so that it would look like he was the one lying there. Once everything on the bed looked normal again, the man immediately returned to the neighboring cell through the tunnel. Using a needle and thread, he carefully sewed the sack shut from the inside. Soon, after finishing their dinner, the guards came to dispose of the body. The plan actually worked. The man's heart was pounding, but neither of the guards became suspicious. They picked up the sack and carried it outside. To make sure it would sink all the way to the bottom of the sea, they tied an extremely heavy iron ball to it. The man inside didn't even dare to move. He simply let the guards carry him all the way to the fortress wall. The moment the sack hit the water, it began sinking rapidly into the depths of the sea. In this deadly and critical moment, the man immediately pulled out the dagger he had prepared earlier. From inside the sack, he cut through the fabric and successfully pushed his upper body out, but he didn't hesitate for even a second. He immediately cut the rope attached to the heavy iron ball tied to his leg. Finally, just 1 second before he would have suffocated, he reached the surface of the water. Gathering every bit of strength he had left, he forced his exhausted body forward and began swimming toward the shore. Back at the prison, it was time to serve food. As usual, a guard came to deliver the meal, but when he didn't see the prisoner's food bowl, he felt that something was wrong. To investigate, he stepped inside. He thought he would wake the sleeping prisoner, but when he got closer, he saw that the dead old man was lying on the bed. Soon, the furious jailer stormed into the cell. The moment he saw the corpse on the bed and the hair scattered across the floor, he understood exactly what had happened. He ordered his men to move the bed, and they quickly discovered loose bricks in the wall. When the jailer saw the smooth and carefully carved hole behind the bricks, he realized that the prisoner must have had some kind of tool. He was certain that the man had cut open the sack and escaped. Without delay, he ordered his men to find him, but it was already too late. By then, the man, whose name was Johnson, had safely reached the shore. Nervous and alert, he looked around at this unfamiliar world beyond the prison walls. He never let his guard down. Whenever he caught even a glimpse of the police along the way, he instinctively hid himself. While wandering aimlessly, Johnson eventually entered a farmer's house. The owner was working in the fields at the time. Taking advantage of the situation, Johnson searched through the cabinets and found some old, worn-out clothes. He immediately took off his prison uniform and changed into them. The farmer would be returning soon, so he quickly got dressed and was about to leave when his eyes suddenly fell on a mirror. The sight of his own face, covered with a thick beard, stopped him in his tracks. After 15 years in prison, Johnson had almost forgotten what he looked like. Coming back to his senses, he didn't waste any time. He grabbed his prison uniform and fled the house. Using only his fading memories as a guide, Johnson endured a long and exhausting journey that lasted 2 months. At last, he returned to his hometown, but when he arrived, he discovered that his old home had been demolished. Even worse, his father had died from illness 5 years earlier. The news hit him like a lightning strike and shattered his heart. Hiding his pain, he immediately went to the church. Accompanied by the priest, he made his way to his father's grave. But what truly shocked Johnson was what he saw next. The gravestone beside his father's had his own name carved into it. Even more surprising, the grave had been built 10 years earlier, but Johnson had been locked away in prison for the past 15 years. How and why had rumors of his death spread throughout the outside world? It was obvious that a massive and terrifying conspiracy was behind all of this. At that very moment, he swore that he would uncover the truth no matter what. Afterward, Johnson went to the house of his fiancée, but an elderly couple was living there now. He quickly asked them about her and learned that she had married someone and moved to Paris long ago. The moment he heard that, it felt as if he had been thrown into freezing water. The double blow of losing his father and being separated from his fiancée Marseille completely broke him. He was already exhausted. Now Johnson was homeless, like a living corpse. He wandered through the streets without any destination. Then, at a street corner, he suddenly came across several police officers on patrol. After years of imprisonment, the sight of the police triggered a natural fear inside him, and he instinctively hid. At that very moment, a prisoner seized an opportunity and escaped. The officer and the fleeing prisoner ran directly toward Johnson. Eventually, the prisoner fell to the ground. The officer immediately began kicking and punching him without mercy. Watching the officer's brutality brought back memories of the abuse Johnson had suffered in prison. His blood boiled with anger. He stepped forward and knocked the officer to the ground with a single punch, as if releasing years of bottled-up rage. Then, at the prisoner's desperate request, Johnson quickly took the keys from the unconscious officer's pocket and unlocked the prisoner's shackles. He had no idea that this one act of kindness, done completely by chance, would eventually change his entire life. After being freed, the prisoner began following Johnson everywhere. Johnson tried many times to send him away, but the man refused to leave. Just then, another group of police officers on patrol appeared ahead of them. Seeing no way to escape, the two men hid inside a horse-drawn carriage. During their conversation, Johnson learned that the man's name was Andy. The police had arrested him for smuggling alcohol along the coast, but for Johnson, the best news was that Andy had a cargo ship anchored out at sea. During the chaos caused by his arrest, the captain and the rest of the crew had abandoned the ship and fled. Only a mute man had been left behind to guard it. As soon as they got out of the city, the two men headed straight for the ship without stopping. Before long, they sailed far away from the city. Even though Andy was a smuggler, he knew nothing about operating a ship. Throughout the entire voyage, it was Johnson who handled the sailing. Andy only provided directions and told him where his home was located. But Andy never imagined that the man who had saved his life had an entirely different purpose for being there. Johnson lied and claimed that a terrible storm would soon arrive. He said they needed to dock somewhere and wait it out. By coincidence, there was a deserted island nearby. Eventually, all three of them arrived there. As soon as they reached the shore, Johnson suggested that Andy and the mute man stay behind and start a fire, while he went up the mountain to hunt a wild boar. But as he climbed, he kept stopping to check the direction with his compass. In reality, he had no intention of hunting at all. It looked as though he was searching for something. When he finally reached the top of the mountain, he pulled a worn and folded map from his clothes. Following the markings on the map, he began searching the island, but Johnson was deeply disappointed. He had practically searched the entire island, yet he couldn't find the location shown on the map. This was the same map he had found in his dead friend's cell before escaping. His friend had told him that it was a real treasure map. While Johnson was frustrated and discouraged, Andy, who had grown tired of waiting, came looking for him. When Andy saw that Johnson had found nothing, he became furious. He immediately gathered his belongings and insisted on leaving the island. Johnson wanted to stay behind alone and continue searching for the treasure, but Andy didn't know how to sail the ship. More importantly, Andy was carrying a weapon. To avoid unnecessary trouble, Johnson finally agreed to leave. After returning to the ship, he kept staring at the island as it slowly disappeared into the distance. He couldn't stop looking back, and by pure coincidence, that very restlessness revealed the true secret of the treasure map. From far away, two large rock formations near the mountain peak looked exactly like the rabbit rock his old friend had described. A wave of excitement instantly rushed through Johnson. His strange reaction caught Andy's attention, but Johnson quickly came to his senses and made up an excuse to change the subject. A short time later, the three men arrived in Andy's hometown, where they received a warm welcome. Andy even wanted to introduce Johnson to his sister. He told him that a place had already been prepared for him to sleep at their house, but Johnson could think of only one thing: the treasure. He politely refused Andy's kindness and insisted on spending the night alone at the harbor. When night fell, Johnson could no longer control his excitement. Taking advantage of the silence, he secretly stole Andy's small boat and disappeared into the darkness. But Johnson never imagined that the mute man had woken up in the middle of the night and seen him taking the boat. The man immediately ran off and woke Andy. Meanwhile, Johnson successfully returned to the deserted island. At the top of the mountain, he spotted a cave hidden beneath a pile of rocks. Driven by curiosity, he removed the heavy rocks one by one and dragged his exhausted body into the cave. Inside, he found not only a massive chamber, but also thousands of iron chests spread across the ground. Johnson could hardly believe his eyes. Filled with hope and anticipation, he opened one of the chests. It was packed with gold, silver, and priceless jewelry. The only sound echoing through the cave was his heavy breathing, while his heart pounded wildly in his chest. He had never imagined that the stories told by his old friend in prison would turn out to be true. He had never imagined that in a single day he would become the owner of such unimaginable wealth. These gold coins were enough to last for generations, and now they would become the greatest weapon in Johnson's quest for revenge. His life had been completely destroyed after spending 15 years rotting in prison for a crime he never committed. Now it was time to uncover the truth behind the entire conspiracy. Afterward, Johnson went to a church and began praying and seeking forgiveness for the revenge he was about to pursue. He knew that this path could force him to commit many terrible sins. It might even condemn him to hell, but he felt no regret. regret. In his heart, he said, "Lord, you must understand. I always hoped for justice, but now all I want is revenge." After easing the burden on his mind, Johnson started putting together an initial plan. His identity was still at risk, so there were many things he couldn't do openly. That was when he remembered Andy, the man who had helped him. Johnson not only bought 2 large ships for Andy, but also purchased 3 luxurious villas for him. In return, he instructed Andy to wear a suit and meet him in the city of Marseille 7 days later. He also handed him a thick bundle of cash. Meanwhile, Johnson disguised himself as a wealthy nobleman and visited the harbor where he had once worked. There, he received some bad news. His former employer had gone bankrupt due to heavy business losses and overwhelming debt. Soon, the day arrived for Johnson and Andy to meet. Andy was both shocked and delighted to see the man who had saved his life looking so different and living in such luxury. Unable to contain his curiosity, he asked where all of Johnson's money had come from. But Johnson was no longer the same man he once was. He casually brushed the question aside and claimed that his family owned a mine and that he had inherited a massive fortune. Then Johnson got straight to the point. He asked Andy to become his right-hand man. He explained that the job might involve dangerous tasks, but in return, Andy would receive unimaginable wealth. There was only one condition. He could never reveal the secret to anyone. After seeing Johnson's enormous fortune, Andy agreed without a second thought. Only then did Johnson tell him the painful story of the past several years. He explained how he had been framed and imprisoned for 15 years, how he had returned home only to discover that his father had died, how his fiancée had married someone else, and most shocking of all, someone had spread a false rumor about his death 10 years earlier. They had even placed a gravestone with his name on it in the cemetery. Andy's first assignment was to go to the police station and find Johnson's file. But Johnson never imagined that after all the effort, he would discover that Andy couldn't even read. It looked like he would have to find another way himself. Fortunately, they didn't come away completely empty-handed. They learned that the prosecutor who had framed him no longer worked there. He had been promoted and had become the royal prosecutor of Paris. Now that Johnson knew where his enemy was stationed, he could think of many ways to bring him to his knees. But first, he needed to get his hands on that file. And with only 2 people on his team, he decided to act personally. He went straight to the man in charge of the records room and falsely claimed that he worked for the Paris Daily newspaper. He said he was writing an article about political prisoners and needed access to Johnson's file for research, but the records manager immediately refused. Prisoner files were highly confidential, and no one was allowed to examine them freely. When Johnson realized that his story wasn't working, he deliberately mentioned the prosecutor's name as he was leaving. The trick worked perfectly. The moment the manager heard the royal prosecutor's name, his attitude changed completely. Without asking any further questions, he directed Johnson to the records room. At last, Johnson found his file. He also learned something important from the manager. A ship owner named Morel often came there. Morel firmly believed that Johnson was innocent and had repeatedly tried to convince the manager to let him see the file, but every request had been denied. Johnson quietly etched the kind man's name into his memory. Then he came up with an excuse to send the manager away. As soon as he eagerly opened the file, he finally found the letter of accusation that had condemned him to 15 years in prison despite being innocent. The letter falsely accused Johnson of betraying his country and collaborating with its enemies. There was no sender's name on the envelope. However, the paper itself came from the inn that Johnson used to visit regularly. This discovery left him confused. He clearly remembered that he had never had any conflict with the innkeeper. In fact, they had shared drinks together many times. It was hard for him to believe that the innkeeper could have been involved in such a terrible conspiracy. Johnson quickly placed the file inside his briefcase, then he folded a newspaper, slipped it into the file cover, and returned the fake file to the manager. Fortunately, the manager never bothered to open it and inspect it. Johnson walked away without being caught. Now his mind was overflowing with questions. He headed straight for the inn. Before entering, he instructed Andy to keep his pistol ready and stay alert for any possible attack. But when they stormed inside, ready to demand answers, they learned that the original innkeeper had sold the place 4 years earlier. He was now running a small motel near Pont de Garde. The moment they heard this, they immediately set off for the motel before the man could escape. Johnson sent Andy to quietly guard the back entrance while he entered through the front door. At first, the motel owner assumed Johnson was just another traveler looking for a room. With a flattering smile on his face, he warmly welcomed him, but Johnson didn't waste time with small talk. He pulled out the accusation letter and handed it to him. The moment the owner read the contents, the smile vanished from his face. He stared at the letter for a long time, but failed to recognize the man standing before him. When Johnson revealed his real name, the owner was stunned. Panicking, he immediately tried to escape through the back door, but it was already too late. Andy was already standing there, blocking the exit with an angry look on his face. Realizing there was no way out, the motel owner finally surrendered. Under pressure during the questioning, he eventually revealed the entire truth about what had happened that year. The letter had actually been written by Danglars and Fernand together. The innkeeper had witnessed their disgusting scheme. He had immediately stepped in and tried to stop them. He even scolded the 2 foolish young men harshly. At that point, Danglars snatched the letter from his hand, crumpled it up, and threw it onto the ground. Then the 2 men stormed off in anger, but the innkeeper innkeeper never realized that Fernand had secretly picked up the letter after he looked away. The very next day, Fernand paid an acquaintance to deliver the letter directly into the prosecutor's hands. When the innkeeper learned that Johnson had been arrested, he was furious. He went straight to confront the two men, but they shoved him out and threatened him with terrifying words. They told him that if he ever told anyone that they had written the letter, they would rip open his chest and pull out his beating heart for everyone to see. The innkeeper was terrified. Shaking with fear, he decided it was safer to stay silent and buried the secret deep inside his heart. After learning the truth, Johnson's blood boiled with rage. Because this coward had failed to stop them, he had spent 15 years rotting behind the bars of a prison cell for a crime he never committed. The innkeeper, whose name was Château, immediately fell to his knees and begged for mercy. He said that he had taken care of Edmond's father until the day he died. When he saw that Edmond didn't believe him, he quickly brought out the money pouch that Morel had given for Edmond. He explained that he had brought food to Edmond's father every day. Morel had also visited often to check on him. Hearing this, Edmond became deeply emotional, but there was still one thing he couldn't understand. Danglars hated him because Edmond had been chosen to become captain, but why had Fernand betrayed him? Château finally revealed the answer. Fernand had married Edmond's fiancée, Mercedes. The moment Edmond heard those words, everything suddenly became clear. Fernand had wanted his fiancée from the very beginning. That was why he had plotted to remove Edmond from his path and send him to prison. The news struck Edmond like a disaster. The horrifying truth was almost impossible for him to bear. His heart felt completely shattered. Overwhelmed by pain, he staggered out of the motel, hoping the fresh air would help him regain control of himself. A fierce fire of revenge burned inside his chest. He swore that every person responsible would pay a terrible price. After calming himself down, Edmond returned to the motel. He gave Château one chance to atone for his sins. Château immediately accepted. Afterward, Edmond sent his companion Jacopo to the farmer's house where he had stolen clothes during his escape. He wanted to repay the debt. When the farmer saw the large amount of money Jacopo brought him, tears of joy filled his eyes. Meanwhile, Morel's company had gone bankrupt. Crushed beneath overwhelming debt, the kind-hearted man had fallen into complete despair and was preparing to take his own life. At that very moment, Jacopo handed a bag of money to Morel's daughter and told her to give it to her father. She suddenly entered the room, interrupting Morel's suicide attempt. When Morel opened the bag and examined the papers inside, his hands began trembling with shock and happiness. They were receipts from all of his creditors. Every single debt had been paid in full. Morel could hardly believe his eyes. Then his daughter pulled out a letter from the bag. It read, "I hope this helps you through these difficult times. Use this diamond to build a new Pharaon." Inside the bag, they discovered an enormous and extremely valuable diamond. Then Morel looked closely at the bag itself. Suddenly, he remembered. It was the very same pouch he had given Edmond as a gift on the day of his engagement. In the end, good people are rewarded for their kindness. Now that Edmond had repaid every debt of gratitude, his journey of revenge was finally about to begin. Jacopo couldn't understand why Edmond didn't simply go to Paris and kill those villains. With patience, determination, and a frightening gleam in his eyes, Edmond replied that such a death would be far too easy for them. The pain and suffering they caused me, I will return it to them many times over. I will make them pay for every single moment.